than we would be if we did not have those constant pressures coming at us. So I will tell you that I happen to believe in these fights. I believe in public agencies. I believe in what they can do. And I think we're fighting the right battles right now, certainly at the University of Wisconsin, about the value of this university and of all big research public universities, and what we should be doing for students and what we should be doing in terms of innovation and research and improving lives of people around the globe. Those are the issues in higher education today. And if you want to be at ground zero on those issues, being in a leadership position in these big institutions is where you want to be, and that's worth it. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so we have about a little bit more than 10 minutes for questions, so I think there are there microphones out there? Right there?
If they're not, you can
and I
shout.
think there's one over there, so go ahead and start.
I'm a recovering professor, and I want to reflect on your point that when you were invited to be dean, the question was why. I think a lot of people in an academic setting rise to be directors and deans because they're exceptional scholars. And making that leap to a manager is really hard, and you've been so successful at it. And so I'm wondering, you were interested in it, but do you have insights for how other economist types can become useful public managers like
and
you?
even non-economist types occasionally. Yeah, so I will tell you, I never set out to have this job. I remember I was actually out working after I was in college before I went to graduate school, and I had lunch with a senior person in the company. And we had a great lunch. He was someone who really became a mentor to me. And he said to me at one point, I understand you want to go back to graduate school in economics. I think that's a mistake, because you really are going to end up at some point being a manager and running something. And I remember walking away from that lunch and saying, this guy is crazy. I have no interest in that. I want to be an economist, right? This isn't a job for everyone, right? We all know people who were great scholars who got promoted into deanships or other positions and actually weren't very good at them, right? And the University of Wisconsin crowd could tell you exactly how good or not good I am at some of this as well. One of the problems for academics is, I'm willing to bet, virtually no one in this room, even though many of you may be department chairs or may be running parts of your organization, has ever had any real training in organizational structure and management. That's not the training we get as social scientists. And many of us, dare I say, even poo-poo the business schools at times of, what are these values, what are they doing with, we're actually teaching real stuff as opposed to that soft stuff. And my best advice is, if you think you might be interested in this sort of thing, learn everything you can about the organization and how it works and how people who you think are effective are, go in and invite people to lunch who are in the organization you think are doing a really good job and say, how do you do that? How do you think about your job? And, if you aren't going to learn it by going to class at the business school, and not all those classes are all that effective either, learn it by living inside the organization and paying attention to how the organization runs and how people who are good in the management jobs are doing their job and what they do that makes them effective, as opposed to the people you see who aren't very good at it. And if indeed, one thing that I found at some point is I loved my teaching. I've got a number of students in the room. I loved working with my graduate students as well as the undergraduates, but there was a real sense of satisfaction to working at another level up, where if you could make some things work better, you weren't affecting just 1, 2, or 5 people. You were affecting hundreds, if not thousands of people, hopefully in a good way. That's always the big catch here. There's enormous satisfaction to that. And people who like moving into those sorts of jobs, like doing that, have some organizational skills, often find it very rewarding. But I will tell you also, if you move into these jobs and if you feel stressed and overworked and just say, I don't have time, this is not what I want to do, you should get out of them. Know yourself well enough to know that you don't get pushed to something that isn't where you want to be, because these jobs take enormous amounts of time and energy. There's always external attacks coming at you, and if you can't have fun at them at some level, you shouldn't be there, because it's not going, it's just too much work if you aren't having some fun. But I don't know if that's an answer to your question. stunned everyone into silence. This is not a public management crowd, Ron. That's the problem. Yeah, I can.
So I think a lot of us here have followed the events at Missouri with some intensity.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, a lot of forces are unleashed there that we really haven't seen unleashed before. And a lot of those forces are of particular relevance to a state university, especially a state in which there's not a lot of diversity in the state and certainly not at the university. And I would really appreciate your reflection
Yeah.
on those forces.
Yeah, and let me say, I know nothing about what's really happened over the last year at the University of Missouri, and I know enough about how press cover these things to believe that nothing you read in the press is very close to a full story of what's actually going on. So I want to make clear these comments are not comments on the specific situation at Missouri often because they're only what I can interpret about it from the papers, and there may even be some people here from Columbia who have things to say. But so, it's clear that, as they say, mistakes were made. Probably the most obvious one from at least what I can read is that there was not, when you talk about immediate communication, there was not the sort of response from the administration at the university to a series of racially sensitive incidents that there should have been. And when things like this happen in your campus, it's really important that the leaders be seen understanding to a certain, even if you can't do much about it in the short run, understanding and responding and showing at least some degree of empathy. And of course, response matters as well on the part of the police, on the part of the communications you do. And there seemed to be a series of events and no one was really responding to them. The fact they didn't even have a senior diversity officer named at the university stuns me. I didn't think there was a university that didn't have someone with that type of title. So that certainly seemed to be a piece of this. All of that said, I will say with my hat on as the head of a large university, I also think that the governance of this organization seems very odd to me because you essentially had two individuals who resigned both on the same day after meeting with the Board of Regents. And the Board of Regents is absolutely absent in all of this. They've released no statements. They've said nothing. They fired a chancellor who basically had been there a year. Now, you don't want to fire, unless that, maybe that individual really just was doing such a bad job on all fronts. You were just cutting your losses. But usually, chancellors have some real difficulties in their first year. You came in from the outside, didn't know the place, and what the Board of Regents should have been doing was mentoring and helping. And their willingness to fire almost immediately was difficult. The other problem that I see from the point of view of the board, and I don't know if this is true or not, it's the way the stories have been written, and it's certainly the impression you get just by looking, is that once the football team protested, everybody caved. And that's not a message you want out about your university. As much as I love my football team, they're not the ones who should be running the university. And that's, that was the message that came out. I just thought was a dreadful message. And the fact that no one on the board is speaking publicly, that they're just sort of back there behind, some sort of leadership is not happening at that university that should have been happening not just over the whole last year, but certainly around this set of incidents. Now, all of us, let's talk about the racial incidents specifically, all of us in every institution in this room could have protests of this sort on our campuses, inside our organizations. That sort of racially insensitive comments at best and explicitly discriminatory and obnoxious and hateful comments at worst happens in every organization of any size. I can promise you that. And the issue of what are you doing about this and how are you communicating with people about what your community is and what it should be and how people should behave and how they shouldn't is really important, and that's something you've got to be doing every day. And even if you're doing it every day, you're still going to get some of these protests at times. So, this is a situation where, we are in a society where there is a lot of debate around these issues, around issues of gender and transgender, around issues of sexual assault. And all of our institutions are complicit in that, and I will tell you as a leader, you get the blame for that, whether you think it's your fault or not. And the best that you can do is be transparent and out there and responsive and thinking, again, not just with you, but it's your senior leadership, your people who are out there on the front lines with student services and elsewhere. What can we do any day that is going to improve the way we deal with this set of issues? And that's hard because there are an awful lot of those issues. And at some point you take your eye off something and something happens the next month and then you're all in trouble. So, it's just a cautionary tale that this, we live in a society where these things happen, and just got to constantly work on them. There are no silver or magic bullets. All of you know that. Whether you live in Wisconsin, where there's relatively small numbers of, it's a very white state, or if you live in Texas, which is a very non-white state, both of the, the nature of the protests might be different, but the possibility of protests are always there. I've looked at Missouri closely. I would say, what did they not do? What should I be doing too that should be responsive? And there's some things you can learn from this, but some of it is everyone is always at risk of these issues because these are such hot issues out there in society. Was there another person walking towards the mic back here? Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you very much. It was just a terrific talk, and it was inspiring about government organizations. And thank you for acknowledging the leaders in our government organizations that, are attacked on a daily basis. And I was curious if there's so much to ask you, but I'll just ask a very simple thing. What books have influenced you in your work?
One of the things that I will say is that I've always had mentors and always felt like there were people who wanted me to do well and were helpful. Some of those mentors are in this room. Judy Garan is one of them, who's just wonderful. People who, and oftentimes, there were many times, because I'm an economist, they were males, right? They had to be males because there weren't any women around. I've thought hard about mentoring, particularly as I became old enough to actually be more of a mentor as opposed to a mentee. And one thing that became very clear to me is not only are there good mentors and people who are better at helping people and more open to that, they're also good mentees. They're people who you want to mentor a lot more than others, right? And, one of the things I would say to younger people is figure out how to be a good mentee. So that people actually want to work with you, want you to come into the office and talk to you, because there's some people, as you all know, you sort of work hard to, no, don't come talk to me today, maybe next week. Both in higher education as well as outside of higher education. I mean, there's always been people there. It's always felt like a rich environment. I've always felt very blessed on that front. I will say something, though, and I was just saying this question of what got you here. This is one of the things that I think is a big advantage for academics when you get into this job. So you all know how academic life works in terms of research. You spend months and months, if not years, putting an idea together, shaping it. You're alone in your office. Maybe you've talked to a few colleagues, trying to get something you think is a great idea together. You get it in a draft form. You take it out with your paper. And what's the main goal is you take it out with the paper in those seminars. Everyone tells you what you did wrong. No one tells you anything good about it, right? And you rewrite it again, and you take it out, and everyone blasts at it. And you rewrite it again, and you send it off to a journal. And have you ever gotten a journal paper that says this is a great paper? Publish it as is. They tell you everything that's wrong with it, and you have to be a really strong self-starter and very sure of yourself in a number of ways to be a successful research academic, because you have to always be defending your ideas in the midst of a very skeptical crowd. And the whole purpose, in fact, of those seminars and those research reviews is to be skeptical about the paper. And if you didn't believe that that was an important idea and can't defend it and can't write it that way and can't respond, you over time will just fade, right? And I will say that type of confidence and willingness to keep persisting in the midst of ongoing criticism about everything that's in that paper is an incredibly useful backdrop and experience for moving into a senior job where anything you do will be criticized, regardless of why you're doing it or what you say about it. And in that sense, I think it's one of the reasons why academics sometimes are quite good at these jobs, you have to, if you don't have some confidence in trusting yourself and where you're going, and maybe you're wrong, and at some point the organization will get rid of you, but you have to have that confidence, because believe me, people, just as they don't come up to you with your papers and say, best thing I ever heard. That did happen occasionally, but not nearly enough. Very few people come up to you and say, gosh, did you do a good job today in that, as chancellor. Just doesn't happen much, right? But it should. So go home and tell your president and chancellor what a good job they've done. Thank you all very much.
Wow. So if there's anyone in the room who didn't already know Becky or didn't know why she was getting this award, it's now really clear. I mean, gosh. we talked earlier about the strategic goals of the organization, and we really strive to be experts in both policy analysis and public management, and to be policy relevant, and to be always pushing on diversity. And you touched on every one of those, and gave a splendid talk. So, boy. And it was to the minute. It was absolutely to the minute. Yeah. So thank you, Becky. That was fabulous. So now we have three other awards today. We have a dissertation award that Lucy Schmidt is going to present.
Thanks, Jane. This is the nice part of the luncheon. Not that Becky's talk wasn't wonderful, but this is the part where we actually get to tell people you did a really great job. So this is the really fun part for me. I want to thank the other members of the Dissertation Prize Committee, Sue Danarski and Mark Long. This year we read a large number of excellent nominated dissertations. We were looking for dissertations that were exceptionally creative and original, extremely well executed, and highly policy relevant. This year, the committee has selected the dissertation of Manasi Deshpande, Essays on the Effects of Disability Insurance, as the best dissertation in public policy and management. Manasi's work focuses on child recipients of supplemental security income, a means-tested income support program for disabled individuals. Child SSI has been growing rapidly, leading to a great deal of debate about the role of the program in the safety net. However, surprisingly little research focuses on how recipients and their families spend these transfers or on the long-term effects of the program on well-being. Manasi's work exploits a policy change that was part of the 1996 welfare reform legislation that creates a discontinuity in the likelihood of removal from SSI for children turning 18. Using this research design, she examines the effect of removal of disabled children from SSI on their adult earnings. She finds that SSI youth removed have very low earnings, recover only about a third of their lost SSI payments, and in addition, removal from the program dramatically increases within-person income volatility, suggesting that income stabilization provides important benefits of the program on well-being. She also finds that removal of an 18-year-old has significant negative effects on the adult earnings of younger siblings, suggesting really important within-family spillovers. Manasi has uncovered an extremely convincing research design to help estimate causal impacts of a growing program. She's done painstaking work with restricted administrative data at the Social Security Administration. Her work provides research-based evidence that can help inform the policy debate over disability insurance. This is APPAM-type work at its best, and it gives me great pleasure to give the award for the best dissertation in public policy and analysis to Manasi Deshpande.
All right, thank you and congratulations. The next up is the Vernon Award, which Ken Couch will award.
So it's a great pleasure to be here today to award the Raymond Vernon Memorial Award to Tom D. and Jim Wyckoff. Tom is from Stanford and Jim from Virginia. The award is named after the first and founding editor of JPAM, who was also a member of the JFK School at Harvard. And the article itself is entitled Incentive Selection and Teacher Performance, Evidence from Impact. Impact was the set of evaluations of teachers that was implemented in Washington, D.C., along with a set of financial incentives for successful teachers. And they worked with data out of that program from the District of Columbia. And their study shows that putting pressure on teachers by establishing a set of thresholds that if you perform low, you could be fired, It leads to voluntary attrition of low-performing teachers out of the school system, but the positive financial awards within the system for high-performing teachers raises their performance further. Again, I think this is another excellent example of APPAM-type research at its finest, and I'm happy to present the award to Tom D., who will accept it, and his co-author, Jim, is at the table. Jim, if you'd like to stand up and be recognized with Tom. So let's do this. Chat. Let's figure this out. Okay, here we go.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken, and congratulations. I remember hearing some of that work presented at an earlier conference, and I thought it was fabulous. So it's great to see it get the award. And then last but not least, the ICPA award, which will be awarded by Iris Jiva May.
Hi. We are very pleased to announce the recipients for the Best Comparative Paper from the 2014 APPAM conference. It is one of 10 such awards that the International Comparative Policy Analysis Scholarly Association extends with partner international associations.